All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to start into our next session. So in this session, we're going to be looking at MotionBuilder and some of the new features that are happening there, as well as talking about just general questions people might have on how to work with MotionBuilder. I think it's safe to say that over the last few years, motion capture has become more and more a central part of what people do in production, whether it's film, games, TV. Now people are doing it in some pretty low-budget stuff at this point. It's no longer the domain of, oh, I have to be Electronic Arts or Ubisoft and have a $300,000 mocap studio to get started. It helps. Never going to knock the $300,000 mocap studio. But as Daryl and I were just talking about, there's a number of companies out there now doing mocap setups where for $7,000 you can have a full-on mocap setup that actually has high-quality, accurate mocap. And that easily puts it into the realm of I'm doing a low-budget commercial. I'm doing, an indie game, that kind of thing. Suddenly, it's like, that's not a lot more than a top-end computer. So keep that in mind as we're thinking about where motion capture is going today. It's no longer what it was even 2 years ago. So just so everyone knows what's going on here, my name is Sean Hendricks. For those who weren't in any of the other streams, I manage the video production and tech marketing portions of Autodesk. We have Chris Viano over here to my side. He is the director of product development, product management, I should say, product management. Director of Product Management, so he oversees all the people that are managing the products that you guys know and love. And then on my other side, on my team, is Daryl Obert, who is the Maya and MotionBuilder specialist on my team. He'll be focusing on the MotionBuilder side for today. So one warning again, I say it in every session, and as I watch the chat window, people pretty much seem to ignore my comment on this, but doesn't matter how many times you ask questions about the next release of our software, releases yet to come, we cannot tell you, we cannot answer those questions. This is not an Autodesk rule. This is, you're a public company and the FCC has rules about what you can disclose at any given time. And so we're not allowed to say that kind of stuff without people smacking us over the head. So feel free to ask those questions, but we're probably going to have to ignore those on the stream. It's just a sad reality. We really do want to tell you. We do, but we can't. So let's dive ourselves into this session.
Daryl got some props.
Oh, Daryl.
Yes.
People already, cool stuff. Welcome, Daryl. There you go. See?
Thank you.
See? Daryl's known and loved. All right. So let's, why don't we just start off with the question that seems to get asked in... I did. Were you not paying attention?
He's over there sleeping.
Chris is already tuning out in our sessions.
Thank you.
Oh. He's just so sure, Daryl, you're just going to rock this that he's just not even paying attention.
It's fine. I understand.
No pressure. So what I wanted to start off with was actually just a simple kind of top-level question. What about this release of MotionBuilder do you think is kind of the coolest thing? What's best?
You know what? I think it's probably the rewrite of HIK. The HIK 2014 solver is it's got a lot of bug fixes to it. There's over 50 bug fixes. It's more stable than it was. The double solve works in a slightly different way, so it's a little bit more robust in its ability to handle the evaluation of double solve. Previously, it would kind of look at your scene when you opened it and try to figure out if there was a cyclic loop, and if there was, it would turn on double solve. And the problem was if you had something that didn't maybe start with a loop in it that needed to utilize double solve, but then got into the state through an animated constraint or something like that, it didn't know how to deal with it. And with the rewrite of 2014, it evaluates basically every time it advances a frame, it evaluates. So you can animate on and off, in and out of a state that needs double solve and out of double solve. So it's a lot better than it used to be. It handles a lot more practical solutions, situations that are going to come up. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that's great about it is the IK system now has the ability to stretch down the spine. So that allows, the human spine stretches and the neck stretches a little bit. So it really allows to soak up a lot of the errors that would sort of happen where that spine would snap and not have any give. So it's just a much nicer solve than we used to have. So 2014 solve would be my favorite new thing in MotionBuilder.
Perfect. Now we got a question almost immediately online that if you're up to the challenge.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Just the question was, I would love to see actual interaction or back and forth between Maya and Mobu with HumanIK involved in the process. And I don't know if you've got something you can show that with.
Yeah, I could probably do something like that. I just installed a new version of the suite, so I haven't actually tried SingleClick to see if it works, but it might work.
Want to give it a shot?
We'll give it a shot. We'll give it a shot.
All right. Daryl's going to give it a shot and see what we can do.
Let's just get a simple rig in here. So if we go to HumanIK, since I don't have anything prepared for this, I'm just going to use a skeleton generator to create a really quick little skeleton. And with that guy, we'll go ahead and we'll turn on a control rig. So that's a basic skeleton that then has this really kind of advanced HumanIK rig on it. And in theory, I should be able to take this.
The reason why we're all white as a background?
No reason at all. I could change that.
Yeah, there you go.
You like that better?
I think that looks like
Look at that. I can go all crazy on you.
Ooh, look at the features. Ooh.
For those of you who don't know, well, I'm on a Mac, so it's Command B, but it's basically Alt B. Will change your background color quickly on, and that's been around forever for those Mac users who don't know about that. So let's go ahead and just see if SingleClick is going to work. So if I say send as new scene, it should open up and send it across. We'll see if it's going to work, because like I said, I haven't actually tested this. There you go. So now it's come across. So basically, we have a live link in between these two applications now. So if I want to maybe do some animating over here, like if we just grab this guy, set a keyframe on it, we're setting full body keys in this example, so it's going to be keying everything. And as soon as I set that keyframe, you can see that it basically strokes all those little markers and all those joints, giving me a visual cue in the viewer as to the fact that all of those bones have been keyed. So we'll just sort of do an FBIK move of dragging his leg across here. You can see how the full body system, basically once that leg sort of overextends, this is really what HumanIK is all about, is the ability to kind of transfer that energy through the whole rig. It kind of goes down and pulls the hips down. So we'll just set another keyframe over there, and you can see that I'm connected to Maya. So if I say update, it'll send it over to Maya, and there's that same move sent over to Maya. So it's a pretty straightforward workflow. It's SingleClick also works between, obviously MotionBuilder and Max, and MotionBuilder and Softimage also. So that's an initiative we started a few years ago, and it continues to develop each release. More stuff comes across through it, so it's pretty solid. That's also how we get geometry back and forth to Mudbox. So it's all based on FBX, which is MotionBuilder's native file format.
Perfect. Now, one of the other questions here was asking about Flex Mocap. I guess someone has watched a little bit of the new feature videos and sent in a question if you could give them a better explanation of what it's for, kind of how it fits into the whole process.
Yeah. So what Flex Mocap is it's sort of two things, and it builds on top of that 2014 HIK solver. The HIK solver, sort of that stretchy spine, gives us the benefit of a higher quality solve. And what Flex Mocap does is it allows us to take optical markers, optical data basically, and solve directly onto skeletons using that optical data. So essentially you take markers and you basically attach them to the bones directly. The thing that's really great about it is it's extremely open. So essentially it's making goals. Like you take a bunch of optical markers and you say, these are going to drive the hips. It finds the centroid of those markers and creates a goal. That goal is in what HIK basically tries to solve to. Now, if you don't like where that goal lives, because it's an open system, you could override that goal, or you could introduce your own logic using expressions or constraints to offset that goal or modify where that goal's position is. The other thing that's kind of cool about it is if you don't want to use HumanIK to do the solve, you could introduce your own solving engine, your own IK down an arm or something if you wanted to do a custom solve. So it's extremely open, and it allows you to work with the optical data directly on the skeletons, which is something that we couldn't do previously. So it's scriptable. You can script it with Python also. So it's really, really cool.
And this is stuff that come directly out of a lot of the work that we've done with customers like Weta, like Lightstorm, and like Electronic Arts, where they use these systems, with, you guys know all the movies that they do. And this is, again, they use MotionBuilder not necessarily for some of this stuff, but we've learned a lot from them. And the flexible mocap system is one of the things that we developed in conjunction with those guys.
And you'll find, I think, MotionBuilder actually is a particularly good example of a lot of our development being driven by working with specific customers that have very highly specific and difficult. They even have yes. Anyone that sees the clocks behind Daryl there's one clock that says New Zealand. We don't have any offices in New Zealand. That's just for Weta. We gave them their own clock in our room here, just so we know what time it is when they call us.
And we have to stay up late for that.
All right, so next question I had in here. One of the questions actually was that I use Maya. Why would I want to go over to using Mobu for something? And Mobu is kind of our short form term for MotionBuilder for anyone who's wondering when we say Mobu.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So Maya and MotionBuilder have a fair bit of overlap. MotionBuilder's tools have been kind of creeping into Maya's workflow. So things like the HumanIK, you'll notice this character controls window inside of Maya looks just like the character controls window inside of MotionBuilder. That's because it actually is the same exact technology. The reason you'd want to go to MotionBuilder and sort of what it does is it takes all that stuff and makes it happen sort of in a stage workflow. So it's got a lot of very customized tools specifically for dealing with live data coming in, and Maya doesn't have that. So if you're trying to do basic retargeting, Maya's HumanIK implementation does a really good job of that. It's basically the same workflow that you'd have inside of MotionBuilder, but if you're trying to stream live data in, or you're trying to have a director look over a shoulder and get his world into that 3D, his camera view into that 3D world, MotionBuilder's really got a bunch of tools specifically designed for that. So things like the heads-up display, the fact that we can output what this viewer is or a separate viewer through the SDI out, a serial digital output directly into an online, directly into an Avid for an edit. There's a lot of sort of stage-ish things. So if you're doing pre-production or virtual production, Maya's just not the tool for that, and that's really where MotionBuilder kind of its sweet spot and what it's really being used for today.
So while we're talking about kind of this idea of kind of virtual production and stuff like that, one of the questions that was being asked here was, what could I do to get reflections and transparency working? A lot of people don't, because they think of MotionBuilder just as a motion capture tool. They don't really worry about thinking about shading and lighting and all those things. But MotionBuilder has really, over the last few years, been specifically designed around being able to create higher fidelity views of real-time animation data. So, Daryl, can you take us through a little bit of kind of what can be done?
Yeah, so this is the scene file. So if you watch the new feature videos that are on the web, this is basically that file with some stuff that's not been finished off. So things like the transparency in the windows and stuff like the bump mapping or the normal mapping on this character. So I can kind of walk you through the process. Basically, the way the shaders work is you essentially add shading technology on top of an object. So if you want a reflection, you have to add a reflection shader on top of the default shader. If you want transparency, you have to add that kind of shading call on top. So you build it up almost in a component kind of lay. So if we grab something like this piece of geometry that's this car that's obviously got different shaders on the windows and the body here, but we're not seeing any transparency. If we kind of scroll down into that truck, get down to its piece of geometry, you can see the shaders that are associated with this. We've got this one that's got some texture maps baked onto it, and then we have this glass shader, and the glass shader is really not doing anything, and that's because you can see here when you turn on the advanced mode, it basically, if anything gets unhighlighted when you turn off the advanced mode, that means that you need to add another shader on there for those types of effects to draw. So things like transparency, reflection, displacement, bump will show up in that list also. Those are all underneath the advanced tab, so that gives you a really quick visual, like, okay, well, if it's in that tab, I need to add another shader on there. So if you go to your asset browser and jump down into your shaders, so in shading elements, inside of here, there's shaders. This is going to give you a quick list of different types of shading calls that you can start to layer on top of it. So if we grab something like, for this guy, if we just grab lighted and drag and drop it on that guy and say, replace all, we can go and turn that no transparency to accurate transparency. And as soon as we do that, that glass shader basically starts to work. So the same thing would happen for something like a bump map on this character. If I wanted the bump to show up on him, I drag and drop that onto there. And in this case, I'd say append. So it comes in, and right now all the lights are hitting it. So I'd sort of enable maybe some of the lights to hit it, maybe just the directional light, just a sunlight, and maybe something like the backfill light. So you can kind of go in here and start adding on, how much you want to, how far you want to go. Essentially, you just kind of build it up step by step by step. So it's a little bit different than building shaders inside of Maya or Max in the sense that, a lot of the cool stuff isn't on by default. You have to sort of add that goodness on top.
Well, it's so much designed around performance first, as in speed, and then what can you do with however much you're throwing at the viewport at any given time. So it makes sense to not have everything be on the instant you pull it in.
Yeah, I guess that wraps it up in a nutshell. It makes perfect sense to me. I don't know, but I use it all the time, so it is a little different than Maya or Max or Softimage in that sense.
Now, one of the other questions here, MotionBuilder, I hear, is specialized in kinematics or character animation. Is it better than Maya or 3ds Max in the gaming workflow, or should I be using both? What's your take?
You know, it really comes down to, if you're trying to do stage workflows, obviously this is a tool of choice. But even if you aren't doing stage workflows, say you're working in Max and you want to use MotionBuilder for an animation tool, it's really, really fast to animate in. So we do have a lot of clients that are using it as an animation engine. For traditional animation, it's got some great things like the story tool, which is its nonlinear editor. It's amazing for setting up cinematics. You can do camera edits inside of it with cross dissolves. You can do time discontinuity. So if you want to, repeat something at a different time or slow something down or speed something up, it has all that flexibility inside of this nonlinear editor for doing both kind of blending of moves and animations as well as camera work. So the story tool's super, super powerful. So like Max, a lot of Max users will use it for that sort of cinematic aspect.
Yes, you do see that all the time. I've gone and done multiple visits to gaming studios like Ubisoft, Eidos, those places, and they all brought in MotionBuilder into the workflows to deal with mocap. And at some point, a number of the artists just kind of went, I'm going to just keep using MotionBuilder just for the animation because I've gotten used to it. I really like the way it works. And then they have a back and forth, just dump it back into Max when they're done and send it along. And in some cases, they've built pipelines now where the geometry is built in Max, the rig may be in Max, but the motion is actually done in MotionBuilder, and the two meet at the game engine. They don't actually meet in Max. They meet separately somewhere else. So they've really come a long way, and it is not just for cleaning up mocap data. There still seems to be a bit of a preconception for a lot of people that that's what it's for. And admittedly, it does it very well, but it's also a very fine animator. And again, for cinematics work, especially, you see that a lot in game studios, particularly. They do all their cinematics purely in this, even if they're not using mocap. So, other questions we had here. One of the questions, and I don't know if you have anything to talk about this, was talking about, is it possible to have particles in MotionBuilder?
Well, MotionBuilder does have its own particle system, so obviously you can use that to generate particles. Interacting with other applications to get particles in, I can't say there's an easy way to do it. I'm sure if you got creative, you could cache it. You could do a Maya particle system, instance some geometry to it, and send that over via a cache, because MotionBuilder can take the caches in from both Max and Maya, which is a great way of speeding things up. Sometimes if you've got a whole bunch of background characters, you don't want to evaluate the rigs in MotionBuilder. You might cache those background characters out. So there's no reason why you couldn't get creative to get Maya's particle systems represented in some fashion inside of MotionBuilder. But no, there's not a direct open up a Maya particle system and have it play back in MotionBuilder. But you could. I'm sure we have clients that are doing it in a creative way with caching.
I'm sure they are, yeah.
Another question we had was, can I add my own stuff to the HUD? So the heads-up display, maybe you should describe for people what that is.
Okay, yeah. You can, and there's a couple ways of doing that. So what the HUD is this is a heads-up display that allows you to represent information that might be important to what the director's seeing or what the driver is seeing. You might have multiple views up, and sometimes someone needs some information in that HUD. And the way it works is it's pretty straightforward. So it's just an element that you drag in. So we'll drag and drop a HUD into our scene, and we'll add it to this camera. So if we go over to our navigator, we now have this HUD inside of here, and if we say create new, there's all these different types of elements in the HUD. So if we kind of look through these guys, these are the elements that it ships with, and some of these, like the text element, are pretty customizable. So you can drag any attribute into the text tool and have it show up in the HUD. Other ones that are customizable, sort of on the sense of, do I want my own stuff in there, would be ones like the flash element, and that's using Scaleforms technology to actually draw flash in our view. So what's really cool about that is, imagine you're doing the next Iron Man movie, and the director's got this CG shot, and he wants to see what's in Iron Man's heads-up display. Well, you can drop that into that HUD as an animated flash and have it all right there. So the last way of adding stuff into the HUD, so let's just go ahead and I'll walk you through the process of creating your own custom text. So we'll say, just call this FOV. All right, so we get this FOV kind of tab there, right? So if we go to this camera, and we look at our properties here. So we've got the FOV selected, and we control select something like this camera, scroll down to the camera settings. Let's grab, I'm not seeing, let's create a new camera. It'll be a little bit easier if we do that. So we'll just go in here into this asset browser and grab a new camera and drop it into my scene. So with that camera selected, we'll go down here to this HUD, and we'll grab that guy and grab camera FOV. Do you guys see camera FOV in there? Resolution, camera settings, so many things. Not enough time to find them. I'm not seeing FOV. Oh, there it is. So we can drag and drop that field of view directly onto that HUD, and it'll basically start showing up and be a live attribute. So it's just a simple drag and drop operation. The other thing that's worth mentioning is if you wanted to add your own custom elements, you can use the API to do that. So I think I've got an example of where the API lives. So if you just go to the OpenSDK Reality Miscellaneous folder, there's a sample scripts or a sample plugin there. So you can create your own elements via that plugin also. So there's a couple different ways of sort of getting your own data in there, either attributes represented through the text tool, Flash, or having your own sort of element added through the plugin. And we supply an example of that plugin.
You want to show an example of, again, for example, like the ruler, showing this, what people would do in a virtual production to try to show what a 3D set would be, just to show the fact that the people use this actually to set up productions and things like that?
Yeah, so the ruler tool was recently added, and it's actually, you think ruler tool, okay, well, that's pretty straightforward, but it actually it's done in a really nice way. Let's make sure that all this geometry is selectable, and it is. The way the ruler tool works is it sort of lets you snap. So if you hold down, it gives you a kind of a cursor of what it's going to be on top of. So if I click on that, it's now snapped to that guy. If we come over here to this guy and click on that, you get this sort of little 3D locator that moves around. So it allows you to basically measure from any point to any other point. And if it's snapped to it, it then becomes a live connection. So you can see as I start to update or scroll through that ruler tool basically has been assigned to that arm. So this is something that's pretty common on a set where a director is going to be looking at something and going, yeah, this doesn't look quite right. What's going on? How close is that character to that wall? Or what's going on with the scale of that door? The character doesn't look like it's the right size for that door. What's the size of that? So this is something that was asked for by one of our larger clients because the director kept asking them, how close is this object to this character, or this scale of this scene? What's going on with it? So,
and eventually, when Spielberg asks enough times, you just put in a ruler tool.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
It's the ruler. Yeah.
We try not to get fancy with it. It's called a ruler. So I've got a number of questions of people if they'd like to just kind of see MotionBuilder dealing with like mocap, like how you would actually take raw mocap and actually map it to a character, that kind of stuff.
Well, that's pretty straightforward. Basically, what happens is, and I don't know that I have it set up on this machine to do that, but I can bring in some data real quick. We'll just use some of the clip art. So when you install MotionBuilder, this is a pretty good little hidden thing that most people don't know about. If you go to your C directory, not program files, but Autodesk, where it basically unzips the install before it goes in, if you go into the MotionBuilder, into content, there's a clip art directory that's got a whole bunch of characters inside of it. And the thing that's kind of cool is it's got a big library of moves. So it's kind of hidden, actually, but it's there. As long as you don't delete that directory, you have all this clip art. So I can show you the kind of process of doing some mocap, dealing with data. So essentially what you do is we can just bring in, we'll bring that monster back in. We'll use that guy. The way the system works is you've got a character, and that character has a source, right? So the source is what's going to drag that skinned character around. So it's basically like a constraint system if you think of it at the most basic level. So if you wanted to get some animation data in there, you just go to the asset browser, and I just added some bookmark folders in here. You do that by saying add favorite path. If you right-click inside of that asset browser, you can make a favorite path to any directory. So I've got the clip art sort of dragged into there. So if we go into motions, and we'll grab some generic motion of, I don't know, pointing. We'll grab a hero pointing. So if we merge this in, we get a skeleton, right? And that skeleton has the movement on it. So if I want my monster to do that movement of that motion capture, I just switch its source to, in this example, it looks like that motion capture move was tied onto something called skeleton. So it's really that simple. So now we've got that mocap data driving that character. So at any given time, you can switch your source, and that essentially is then dragging that skinned character around. So if we wanted to begin to animate on top of that, what we'd want to do is we want to push that data back onto the control rig. So that's MotionBuilder's, that kind of HumanIK rig. That would allow us to really easily layer animation on top of that. I hope that answers the question. I think it does. Does it?
I think so. So anyone here in the room have any questions they'd like to ask about mocap, MotionBuilder, anything like that? Feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I will go to the next one on the list.
Have you guys ever tried mocap? No? You have to wear a funny suit. That's the first rule of mocap.
A funny, unflattering suit is usually the necessary step in doing mocap. Okay, I have another question here, Daryl, that came in on the live. Can you show the best way of editing different clips for arms versus legs, etc., if the character is not at 000 space?
I can show something like blending two clips together.
Yeah, I think it's expecting some problem.
Mocap from different takes.
Yeah, mocaps from different takes.
Yeah, let's use clip art to do it. So we'll go in here and grab a character. We have Chris Viano as a character inside of our system here, which is awesome. So we're going to use him for this. This is him in the unflattering mocap suit. For those of you who haven't seen him in a mocap suit, this is exactly what he looks like.
Exactly.
It's one of the things you learn at Autodesk. You end up in a management role. Eventually, someone will have a CG model of you.
Yes, and we're gonna take all kinds of creative freedom with that CG model.
My digital dignity has been is not that strong.
Yeah. So let's go back to the motions here. So we kind of talked about the story tool as a great tool for doing editorial work as well as blending. So we'll use that in this example to sort of take two takes and mix those guys together. So in the story tool, you can add tracks. You insert tracks. So they can be generic animation tracks for things like cameras or lights or something that was generic. If it's a character, you'd use a character animation track. And then obviously, if it's a camera, you'd use a camera animation track. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop some motions into that. So if we go to Mail, and we'll grab something like a run turn. Let's see if we can find a run turn down here. Run turn right. Run turn left. I don't know. That sounds good. We'll drag and drop that into the story tool. So as soon as we drag and drop a clip into the story tool, that basically loads that movement onto that character. So now we're using the NLE version of that to kind of drive that character. And let's just put this to control rig real fast. That'll help us out a little bit. So obviously if I move that clip around or scale that clip, because it's in an NLE environment, we're going to be basically changing that data in a non-destructive manner. That data lives on disk. We've just dragged into a bin, into a timeline, basically. So what we've got is we've got one clip, and we want to get another clip of another move to blend with this one. So let's go down here and grab something that's like, I think there's a tumbling clip in here. Generic motions, maybe it's over here. I thought we had a tumbling. There we do. We'd have tumbling. So we've got this tumbling clip. And the tumbling clip obviously is going in a very different direction, right? So what we want to do is we want to blend between these. So if I just overlap these automatically, we start to get this kind of dissolve between those guys. So just by dragging those two clips on each other, they start to do that kind of nice cross dissolve. But obviously, it's not doing a great job because they're in completely different spaces. So what we're going to do is we're going to display our kind of skeleton a little bit. So there's a hotkey for that. Let's get into the viewer here. Come on. So let's turn on ghosting. So as soon as we turn on ghosting, we get a display of basically where those clips are, sort of the end frame of that last guy as well as this clip right here. So if I want to, I can take that and I can begin moving that and positioning that manually to sort of line these guys up so that the first one sort of lines up with the last one. And you could work on it this way to blend between those and get something that looks pretty good. Or you can use the auto matching. And basically what that does is it allows you to take any node. So, you might find like a foot node that ends, like is the left foot that's planted in the first clip, or is it his right foot that's planted at the end of the first clip? So you sort of find what foot's planted at the end of the first clip. You might even go back and edit the other clip if that foot isn't the one that's planted. You might come back here and peel this back a little bit until that is the foot that's planted. But basically you sort of figure out this foot's planted at the ending of one clip and it's planted at the beginning of the next clip. That's a good place to start trying to do our cross dissolve. And what you can do then is just turn on auto, pull up the match. It's going to automatically load that effector as your match object. So you can match around any node inside of that hierarchy, right? So in this example, we're just grabbing his left ankle, but it could be his hips or his waist, and you can map both the orientation of that node that's going to basically rotate that other clip to sort of pick up the tangent that was left on the last clip, and that's going to be the tangent that next clip's going to line up onto, as well as the position. So we'll match both rotation and translation, and you can specify, with my clip that's currently selected, I want to match to the previous clip, so that's why I have it set right now. And where do I want that match time to be? Do I want it to be at the beginning of the clip, the end of the last clip, the in between the two clips? So we'll just say in between the two clips. We'll apply that. We'll give it a little bit of over cross dissolve there. We'll rerun that match because it'll be a little bit better now that they're on top of each other. So you can see it's sort of repositioned that clip for me automatically. So it's a really awesome tool for dealing with motion capture and sort of blending between these different takes. And obviously we're doing this on a whole character, but there's no reason why you can't add subtracts for just an arm or just a leg.
Yeah, and we got a response as you were doing that one of asking if he could actually see if there's some way you could just blend a motion into like a piece of the body or something.
Yeah, so you just introduce a subtract, which we're kind of highlighting right here. And the other thing that's kind of cool is we've added, I don't have a bunch of clips in here, but we've added, this was not in this release, but the last release, we added folders. So the ability to take a bunch of clips off of, sort of different takes or different characters and group them together into folders, and then you can edit those folders directly and scale those folders directly and things like that. So you can sort of take a whole grouping of clips and work out as one, which was added, I think in 2013 we added that. So.
Yeah, so we got a number of people asking about how MotionBuilder and Max integrate with each other. We've seen kind of the Maya version of it, and can you talk a little about that?
The MotionBuilder, and it's a similar thing. Basically, when you're working with a character, the first step when working inside of a MotionBuilder is teaching MotionBuilder about the hierarchy of the skeleton. You need to go through this characterization process using this character controls window. Basically, you populate the window with the bones, right? And what that does is it gives MotionBuilder a common starting point. So every asset that comes into MotionBuilder goes through this characterization process. Essentially what it's doing is it's looking at the character in a T-pose, and it's creating an offset map. So if there's any weird local rotations, when you hit characterize, it's basically saying this character is zeroed out. So that's a common starting point for all of the assets that you have in the system. So the thing that's kind of cool about this is if you're bringing stuff in from Max, if it's got a cat rig or a BIP rig, these character templates, you can just drag and drop on a special version of the template that's already got the naming set up for a BIP or for a cat rig. So it makes it kind of go back and forth in a nice way. That it's also the same for Max going to Maya. You can use the cat rig going back and forth through HIK with Max and Maya, which I'm sure if you look at Louis Marcoux's blog, I guarantee you he has lots of high-quality information on there about how to do that between Max and MotionBuilder and Max and Maya.
Perfect. Now, one of the questions that we've been answering in all of the sessions throughout here, just because we obviously know people are swapping out and there's not the same people necessarily every session, is about kind of the development process on our side of things and what, because everyone has their favorite feature they want, and as we can watch in the forums, gets really mad when that favorite feature doesn't show up in this release. So I'd like to give Chris a kind of chance to talk a little bit about how we pick our features.
Sure. So again, we just released this year's software, so give us at least one day. Back off. Just kidding. But so, again, the process for us for developing features is a year-long process. Actually, many of the product managers that work on these products are at the GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. They're meeting with customers that use the products. They're meeting with customers that don't use the products. Again, people that are in forums like this. Why would I use this product? Again, you have to meet with an equal number of people that want to use your product and don't understand it. So again, a lot of the issues that people bring to us, we catalog them, we prioritize them. We have beta forums where we start to develop the features. And again, anytime you guys want to talk to us about features, we have different places like the area. We have different places like events like this, or you can contact us and say, I want this feature, why I want this feature. And again, we're usually pretty receptive to that. We go by, the amount that people want the feature. Those are the features that we develop first. And again, we have an active beta process. So anybody on this forum here that wants to beta software, it's a brave crowd that goes in and tries out this stuff and gives us feedback. But again, that's how the software gets better, is by having users test this stuff in production, so that when it comes out in the releases, that it's quite strong. So again, it's a pretty open process. It goes year round, meaning that they finished the 2014 versions. These guys are already working on the next stuff. So it's a pretty annual process.
All right. Do we have any other questions in the crowd? Any other questions online?
It was about Softimage. MotionBuilder Softimage.
Yes, there was a question about, do we have any workflow between MotionBuilder and Softimage?
You can send stuff back and forth. Yeah, the FBX is there, SingleClick's there. I think there's some new stuff in the crowd for 2014 that you can get some data back and forth. Haven't tried it myself, but I'm sure Mark Chonigal would be the guy to talk to about that.
Yes, we have other experts in the Softimage side that are spending more time on that than we are. Just lost my thing. So I think we're running to the end of our session. So I just wanted to open up for Daryl, because I'm not seeing a lot of kind of new big questions showing up here. Daryl, is there anything you think we should show off here before we kind of walk away?
We could share the stretchy spine stuff real quick.
Yeah, that sounds like cool.
Let's just we'll get Chris back in here and we'll stretch him out a little bit.
Because this is definitely one of those issues that pops up in motion capture all the time. Is a rigid model doesn't necessarily represent the way a human's body actually adjusts itself based on weight and inertia and everything else.
All right, so here's the character. What we're currently looking at is just the original bones of the character. So this would be the bones that come across, or the joints that come across from Maya or Max or Softimage. So this is the original rig that the skin's bound to that goes along for the ride. So to begin working with that, we're going to go ahead and put a control rig on there. And again, that's going to be the kind of FKIK rig. So what we want to do is just turn on the display of the skeleton. And if we jump to our character node, when we create this guy, Sven, he's now got this character that's got the 2014 solver on there. So that's good that it automatically uses that new solver. And if you go down to the stretch tab here, you'll see that all of these attributes that are sort of highlighted, and this is where being colorblind really messes with me, because I don't know what color that is, but Sean could probably tell me. It's blue? Perfect. It looks purple to me. Any attributes that are, we basically flag the attributes that are 2014 specific. So that's kind of cool that we have this nice highlighting of, hey, this is new in this solver, check it out. But the stretch attributes are on by default. And what it's set up to do is we've got stretch for spine, stretch for neck. It can go between 80 and 120%. So that basically means it can get, if a joint was, 10 units big, it can go down to 8 units, and it can go up to 100 or 12 units. So it's basically got the ability to change 40%. So if I take something like what used to be his sort of shoulders, and we turn this stuff off, and I move this around, I've turned off the stretch, you can see that character, if I pull that up and down, his spine doesn't really go anywhere. But if we increase the stretchability, you can see we get that nice squash and stretch happening down that spine. And really what it's doing is it's not actually scaling these bones, it's actually changing the translation of the end of the bone. So we're not introducing scale keys down the bones, we're changing positional data down the bones. So it's it's a great feature that really lets the solver kind of soak up errors and things like that. It makes it feel a little bit more realistic or human, and it's a big deal actually. So that's one of the great things about the 2014 solver that's kind of cool and new. And then tomorrow, in my speed demo, because we only have 13 minutes to show 2 products, I'll show an example of double solve. So if you guys tune back in tomorrow night, we'll be going over the double solve, which is also kind of improved in 2014.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. So I'd just like to thank again everyone for coming out, everyone for being online and checking it out. Tomorrow we're going to have 2 more of these sessions, well, 3 more of these sessions. We'll have one for 3ds Max, one around Maya, and then we'll have another special presentation from Duncan Brinsmead, one of the lead research scientists on the Maya team, who's going to take us through some of the cool stuff he's been playing around with the last little while. He's always a crowd pleaser. You often need the hook to get him off the stage, so he's usually quite good that way. And then after that, of course, we're going to have the main event at the end of the day where we will be showing off a few other of the new features. We'll have some guest presentations and a live panel discussion with a bunch of industry experts talking about kind of the state of the entertainment world these days, which has become particularly more interesting in the last few months. I think everyone will agree. So again, thank you very much, everyone, and we will talk to you later.